I ended my keynote talk by asking for a public square conversation about what are currently called spiritually transformative experiences and historically called mystical experiences. Last year, I delved into what a mystical experience is and why it's so inclusive of so many of us and outside of the NDE community and including the NDE community. The research and publications IANDS scientists have gone a long way in establishing the veracity of near-death experiences, and more recently, of many other kinds of spiritually transformative experiences, such as Kundalini awakening, which goes by many names in many cultures, or shared death experiences, SDEs, or after-death communication, ADC. These are not new phenomena. They are ancient human experiences that have been repressed for centuries, particularly in the West. It is taboo publicly to speak about our spiritually transformative experiences. Bring it up at your next neighborhood barbecue, or in a committee meeting, or at a local bar. Gauge the response. Read the crowd. Woohoo, nut job. Talking about mystical experiences in the public square begets social isolation. Secretly, however, over 45% of those surveyed, as shown in last evening's talk by Marjorie Woolacott, have had an after-death communication from a disembodied loved one. 45%. Almost half the population. Her figure reflects the informal survey I conducted in Episcopalian, Congregational, Independent, and Unitarian churches around New England. And every pulpit I preached as I toured Sunday to Sunday, I conducted a survey from the pulpit. And every church, on average, 50% of the attendees in the morning had experienced a life-changing ADC, after-death communication. My informal survey, now backed by numbers, led me to the conclusion that for many tens of millions of near-death experiences, for as many of us as there are, that there are many more ADC experiencers and other kinds of mystical experiencers living in the world exponentially, millions more than the human beings who have been spiritually transformed by death. So many millions more have been spiritually transformed by their mystical, your mystical experience. And everybody's afraid to talk about it. Me too. I kept my mouth shut about my NDE for 20 years. But now it's the time to talk about it. Publicly, aloud, from the rooftops. Why now? Medical science has been resurrecting the dead through resuscitation by the tens of millions worldwide ever since the 1960s. Thank you, Dr. Pim Valnomo. There is right now a growing and powerful, great global awakening underway. 40 years ago, the daring and then skeptical researchers of IANDS noticed near-death experiences and researched them. They discovered, as mystical geniuses have known and artfully described in hundreds of books down through the centuries from every religion, well, science discovered the same thing that the mystics have known, that they are telling the truth. We are spiritual consciousnesses. We are spiritual consciousnesses having embodied experiences. Your mystical experience, the one that you've had, has revealed to you a truth, a wisdom, an understanding of your true nature, of your higher self. And you felt this. it changed your life. When you recall it, it remains vivid in your memory, right in your heart. You understand it as it does in mine. Maybe it gave you a spiritual compulsion to pursue it, to change your life. And maybe you repressed it because church or society told you to. When I asked from the pulpit in each of these nearly 20 congregations where I spoke, I would ask, who here has had an ADC? And that 50% raised their hands. And of that 50%, of that 50%, all of them admitted to having told one or two people. 50% of the people told one or two people, but none of the 50 had ever spoken any more than that, especially not in church. Because the Bible says, quote, "And no marvel, for even Satan fashioneth himself into an angel of light." We don't stand a chance against that 2 Corinthians 11:14 verse. But there's no evidence of this. There's no evidence of this. There's the evidence of the opposite of this. There's beauty and love and joy. This sentence puts the fear of God, not just in some experiencers that button their lips as a result, but more powerfully half undergirds the repression of mystical discourse in Western culture. That's only the half of it. No Christian is going to talk about meeting a being of light, even if that light brings love, joy, hope, and understanding, or peace. And I want to thank you, Marjorie Woolacott, for giving me a sleepless night last night, causing me to rise early in the dawn this morning and rewrite my entire talk. Your science blessed me. Science blesses us. The other undergirding beam that represses, that holds down. I realize I mixed my metaphors. The undergirding beam that supports the repression of mysticism is reason and materialism of science that tossed out what it could not see previously nor measure. Now we know we can measure it with accumulations of evidence. And I'm not here today to give you that evidence. Evidence is the important job of IANDS. I'm an experiencer. I'm here to say that there is a great global awakening underway, and you are spiritually, and if you are a spiritually transformed person who came to your change through a type of mystical experience, then you're part of it too. And we are part of this web of light, living on the earth, pouring light through the world, through our heart openings, where the grace of the mystical experience has touched us and is touching us, connected us, and is connecting us, and made us aware of that connection interiorly and exteriorly. Now we know the earth is rapidly changing, and the effects of climate change are now. We humans are headed into a future of floods, intense hurricanes, great droughts, and maybe social, political, and economic change. Science has warned us. Reason has warned us. But what is humanity to do? Religion has divided us and divides us. We have in our culture, our own America, a culture war. And we have a real religious war going on in the world too. Call it whatever you want. I will kill you and send you to my hell for your belief. Your hell and heaven are fantasies of your books. My books tell me the truth. I go to my heaven for sending you to my hell. Absurdity. Every major religion started with a mystic, Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah of the Baha'i, Guru Nanak of the Sikh, for example. Mysticism abhors institutionalization. There is a great global awakening happening inside of tens of millions of hearts brought back from the dead by medical science. And they're just the vanguard of the greater masses of all the people. 45% of one type of mystical experience of the population. 45% have been touched by the divine and keep their mouth shut. Mysticism abhors institutionalization, which create stories, doctrines, and dogmas that are based in belief and not in your experience. You know in your heart of hearts the truth of what happened to you, even if you can't language it, even if you can't say it. And Christianity in America is about belief. But you know by experience. Each mystical or spiritually transformative experience lodges a bit, a portion of wisdom in your soul. You know this truth when you say it, but when you say it, it lacks all depth and loses all strength of feeling. You have a story that cannot be told. You have a story that cannot be told in truth with a capital T. You can tell your story, but you can't capture the truth. None of us can. But the poet before me, the other poet before me this morning, and there's two musicians, they captured it not in the individual words, but in the, which were beautiful, but in the presence of their heart while they were speaking. That's where the truth came from. I felt it in my heart as they spoke because they artfully managed the words. And in the art, allowed my ear of my heart to hear. None of us can say it with accuracy. And your problem with accuracy is the same one faced by all mystics, including Lao Tzu and Rumi, Hafez and Kabir, all of whom used poetry, imagery, metaphor, simile, and symbols to speak the unspeakable. We hear their words. When we hear their words, when we listen with the ear of our hearts, they resonate in us. Their frequency is carried in the words they penned centuries ago, which pierce our living hearts today. This moment, love, comes to rest in me. Many beings in one being, in one wheat grain, 1,000 sheaf stacks. Inside the eye of the needle, a turning night of stars. This poem by Rumi, this moment of love comes to rest in me. Listen with the ear of your heart and hear his meaning. This moment of love comes to rest in me. The action is rest, and the rest is action. Many beings in one being, including himself. Oneness being. In one wheat grain, a single seed, a forest of trees from a single seed, from a pine seed, a forest of trees, from a wheat grain, as far as the eye can see, of green grass growing. Inside the needle's eye, this tiny thing, the night stars, infinity, infinitude. You are part of a great global awakening. All the children of light are. And if you've had a spiritually transformative experience which radically altered your life, that changed your direction, if you have had, in the Christian language, a born again experience that has nothing to do with words you say or beliefs you declare, that happened in the core of your heart by the presence of the divine, however the compassionate one reached to you, each mystical experience, it causes some level of shattering of the self. Then comes the new direction. The new self, the changed self, can and will be renewed again and again with every and each successive experience. Each time. It's not a one-time thing. I was listening to Janie last night. Her language was so accurate about the truth of the self-shattering and the readjusting, the constantly readjusting that NDEers need to do. And this is true of all of us who've had mystical experiences, including visitation from the dead. You have to adjust yourself to truth. I use Christian language mixed with science language and mystical languages from other traditions. Now, language matters, but humility matters. We each receive through grace a gift of understanding, and we each have it in limited scope, and we express it through the words we have the best we can, gained in our language through our culture of symbols and myths, and metaphors and similes. As our 21st century of communication unfolds, right now, NDEers are networking globally and will continue to do so. So let's please remember that every mystical writer down through the centuries wrote about their experience and the context of their lives. They all knew that no words can confine or define the unitive state of being. When in the oneness state, there is no self to experience the oneness state. Your self is gone, and yet, when you come back, you have memory of it. This presents the extreme problem of talking about the unspeakable, when the you who is you, the you who you thought you were, is gone. The title of my talk is Artfully Languaging the Ineffable. Language can become a prison too. Believe this one thing and these words, and say them or go to hell. Belief is the one thing that can trap me. Words can trap me. All my belief went away when I died. All of it. The only true truth is the language you hear inside of you in the space where the divine spoke to you. And when you touch that space, whether you can say it or not, you can artfully language this in silence with the other person who also has seen such a thing as you. And if you can speak it, do so as those two poets did before me today, with the opening of your heart to the living presence, so that the ear of the heart of the other can hear the words from the lips of your soul. And as you read, as you speak, remember, we all struggle to express the inexpressible. So listen with your poetic ear and read with your literary mind. See in the Upanishads, see in the book of Genesis, not history, not infallibility, but myths that tell forth truth with a capital T without needing to be literally true. And then come into the public square with me, humbly, humbly knowing we cannot say what lives in our hearts, but we can share it. humbly knowing that mystical knowers like you and me are waiting for you to join us there. And understand that there may be some where you are and maybe none. And if they can't see, let them be. And if you hear someone speaking a different language than yours, listen and feel with your open heart to what's actually being said. Artfully languaging the divine begins with listening through the creative ear of your inner self. So hook not yourself to the words that are said, nor the story being told. Listen instead with an open mind and an open heart. The unmanifested, the uncreated, is above all language and all religion, and is beauty and love. Among Islam has 99 names, among 99 names for the divine. And I'll close with this. Weeks ago, in preparation for today, I asked the following question on Facebook in a near-death experience group. Using one word to summarize your experience of the afterlife. Use one word to summarize the experience of the afterlife. My word is love. What's yours? There were 70 answers, and these are the words. Love, pure love, loving, unconditional love, agape love, all forms of love, 15 times mentioned. Peace or peaceful, 8 times. Amazing, twice. One each. Bliss, eternal. Listen with the ear of your heart. Bliss, eternal, pain-free, acceptance, light, belonging, no fear, freedom, relaxed, unjudging, alive, creating, freedom, orgasmic joy, epic energy, nothing, reincarnation, pure joy, choice, reassurance, indestructible, horrific, calmness, serenity, pain, all beautiful, exciting bliss, stillness, nirvana, and judgment. All of those words apply to my near-death experience, including my horrifically painful life review of self-judging, which led directly into the oneness of those other words, of all those other words, those positive words. And all of those positive words are fragments of the largest word, the all-encompassing word, love. It's the word so many of us come back with. And during this great global awakening, we are all struggling to find words to speak the unspeakable. Some use music, some use poetry, some have no words, some only have service in the world, which is beautiful and needed, and a big way to speak about the unspeakable. So come join me in the public square. Come take the risk, even in your quiet way, where you are. Because each of us is an LED bulb at the end of a fiber optic cable of love, shining light into the darkness, shining light out from and into the world, illuminating each other. When I see the light in you and you see it in me, it's because the light sees itself. That's how, when those two poets and musicians played and spoke, that energy came through my speakers, through my screen, and resonated in my heart. This light, it speaks for itself. The light hears itself inside you. It hears it when it's spoken by another. And we magnify this light when we gather together. Never before in history of the world have there been so many powerful and humble mystics walking on the earth. And the ears, we're just heralds, reminding you of who you already know you are deep inside yourself. encouraging you to speak up in your safe places. First, let's find out how many of us there are. Talk to the people around you. Tell them your story. You might be surprised how many will listen and understand. Half the population. And then let's talk publicly by the tens of millions right where we live. This climate change is coinciding with this great global awakening. There are many more of us now. And this NDE thing is propelling us all to speak and bring it into the public forum so that everybody can join the party of light, where love is the vision and the mission and the truth. So keep your hope. Be strong in the light. Our inward journey connects us to the divine, but so does our outward when we touch each other. We have our inward path, but we live in the world. We are between these two. We are the intersection of spirit and flesh. And through the hundreds of millions of us, the hundreds of millions of mystics alive today who have had any number of kinds of experiences, small and large, together we stand a better chance to nudge the world toward a better future for us all. And how do we do this? By weaving it into our lives, and music and poetry and language and bread and conversation in our business life. As we approach people on the street, we don't have to talk about it. We just have to live in it and let it speak for itself. This isn't politics. This isn't religion. This is the poetry of the soul speaking love through each of us, to each of us. You are the light of the world. We illuminate each other in equality when we are together. We are a spider web of light spread across the surface of the globe. We are not alone. Trust it and be humble to it. I was going to end there, but before I was an NDEer, I was a natural born mystic. And I want to tell you that before I had my NDE, wisdom had already lodged in my soul, just like it does in all the millions of people, tens of millions, who have not had a mystical experience of an NDE type. I was a natural born mystic. My mystical life began when I was 5 years old, with my first out-of-body journey, carried into heaven by my being of light. Remember what I said about the being of light in the beginning? Even Satan can disguise himself as a being of light. You learn pretty young to keep your mouth shut about beings of light. My angel carried me into heaven. And then after my first NDE, when I was 6 years old, I had a second one. And then I had a multiple of them. 6 of them before my NDE and many more after. Increasingly intensive experiences. I want to close today with one mystical experience. I was going to tell the first one that happened to me when I was 5. But last night, while I was moderating for Marjorie Willicott, we temporarily lost her feed. And I began to tell this story and then stopped because she came back on. I was trying to fill the time, keep the people present and entertained and engaged. And like most churchgoers, I was a minister, and I kept my mouth shut, not because I feared my NDE or my near-death experiences. I wanted to keep my job. I didn't want to lose my status, my income, my reputation by telling any mystical experiences. I didn't want to lose the respect of my family or friends or peers. So I kept my secret life secret, not just my NDEs. And what happened to me on this particular day and over the next 3 days that followed it wasn't a secret. It happened in public, and it scared the hell out of my friends and my very brand new life. This is my Kundalini experience. This was in 1985. I died my first death in 1981. Christians might call this experience a theophany or a descent of the Holy Spirit. I think of it as Kundalini. I came out nationally as an NDEer when my book, Heaven Was Beautiful, was published. And it took a lot of coaxing for me to come out, but it felt safe enough to come out and to stop masking in public. But I had a plan because it's still taboo to talk about mystical experiences. NDE has become more acceptable. And now I'm slowly coming out with bits and pieces of the rest of my mystical life. This in-body Kundalini awakening after my NDE eliminated myself. And after hearing this story told publicly here, I hope you find someone you can tell your story to. The more of us that speak of these things, the more normalized it will become. I was in a car as the passenger driving down a 4-lane road, 2 lanes south, 2 lanes north, double guardrail in between, a little bit of grass running down the middle slip. I saw a car upside down, land upside down on the guardrail, and people spill out. By the time we stopped and I ran across the street, a group of softball players, I assumed by their cleats, collected, milling about, not knowing what to do. An angry man stomped around. He had been the driver, the son, I learned, of the man lying on his back, unconscious, underneath the car, upside down, on the guardrail. On the ground, I went to him, asking, anybody else? Is anybody here a nurse or a paramedic? And nobody was. So I volunteered to take over the scene. I've been National Ski Patrol. I checked his eyes. They were unequal and unreactive to life. He might have a head injury. My chipmunk just jumped on my screen. He might have had a head injury. I palpated his body, bone by bone, finding nothing obviously broken. I went to his stomach, his paunch, his beer belly. Where it should have been soft with fat, it was stone-like and hard. I wondered if he had had internal injuries and was bleeding out interiorly. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't treat him even for shock. I feared if I raised his legs to bring blood to prevent shock, bring blood to his head, he'd bleed out interiorly and cause worse damage to his brain. We covered him with a blanket. Someone called an ambulance. They had no cell phones. I don't even know how that happened. I think he drove away to go get a phone. Not knowing what to do, I put one hand over his forehead and one hand over his second chakra, sacral chakra, about an inch away, and I closed my eyes and I began my chant. I've been meditating, centering prayer, since 77 at that point. I've been practicing Kriya Yoga then for several years, combined with Hatha Yoga. I knew that I had radiance. I knew I could feel and see his aura, but I didn't know this was going to happen to me. I closed my eyes and began to chant. And as soon as I began my chant, my interior exploded. My crown chakra opened, my root chakra opened, all of my chakras opened, the whole interior of me, right to the edge of my skin, became light, illumination, and I was not there. It eliminated all of me. I became light, and the light pulsed through me into him. And like a flash of lightning, it pulled back, and I was back again. And I saw the light in memory. I saw the light inside that had been there, a reflection of it, and it came again and again and again in pulses, pulsing through me. I was there, I was gone. I was there, I was gone. I was there, I was light itself, and it pulsed through me. And then suddenly there was somebody next to me. And it was the ambulance attendant. And he said to me, "How is he?" And I told him what I knew. And he asked me if I had been trained. I said, yes. I told him I had been in ski patrol. He said, "I'll put you on head traction." So they put me on head traction. Somebody else had head traction at the time. They shifted me into that. They collared him. Together we rolled him and put him on a backboard. We strapped him, put him on the gurney, and off he went. And I was done. I didn't know what had happened to me. And I got back in the car, and as we were driving south, my friend said, "What happened?" And I began to tell him the story. And as I told him the story, I looked across the highway and I saw a cross sitting on a steeple. And this cross, it leapt off the steeple and flew through space and struck me on the interior and exploded into fire. It felt like my whole inside was burning, filled with oil. I see that my time is just about up here. What I'll do is this. I'll say that for the next 3 days, I was lost. Every time I closed my eyes, I was flying across the universe toward light. And whenever I opened my eyes, I was in the world again. And in the end, 3 days later, after my family, my wife, and my friends had talked about committing me because it had so messed me up, I was living in a mystical experience in the real world, and only I could see it. And I knew it was love and light and beauty. And then it ended. And I was shattered, and I was reformed, and it was over. And I wish I could have taken a little more time to fill out that story, but Kundalini awakenings are real.